Hello everybody and welcome. In this video, we'll show you how to use Microsoft Access, and by the end of it, you'll walk away with your own functional database along with a solid foundation of how Access works. All right, let's get into it. So what exactly is Microsoft Access? Well, Access is often defined as a relational database application, and that's just a fancy way of saying that a database is simply a collection of information that pertains or relates to one central theme. For example, let's say you want to start your own business, so all the data you keep is associated or related to just your business exclusively. Some examples of common databases include inventory management, sales pipelines, customer service, and so on. The big question people often ask is why even use Access in the first place? Well, one reason is most people tend to store their information in a spreadsheet, and that works fine for a while, but they run into trouble when they start asking complex questions about their data. For instance, say they want to see all the orders from a particular customer, and they may find questions like this difficult to answer, mainly because they had to jump through a lot of hoops to answer it. Another reason to use Access is that when you store your data in Excel, you may eventually hit Excel's limits, because Excel can only handle so many rows and columns of information, and the max size of an Excel file is 2 gigs. Ultimately, it really boils down to if you store all your data in Excel, you'll eventually wind up doing way more work than necessary. Additionally, it's also beneficial to learn Access because a lot of the components that you learn in Access transfer into other big league databases like SQL, MySQL, Oracle, and others. So think of Access as being a springboard or a primer if you ever decide to learn these apps. Going one step further, the concepts that you learn in Access, say table relationships, can be applied in other applications like Power BI, Tableau, and others, so you get a lot of added benefits. All in all, you can't go wrong by knowing it. Okay, so in this course, you're going to build your own database. We'll start by looking at the big picture and learn about the various components that make up a database. Then we'll learn how to build tables, which is the most critical part of your database. Next, we'll learn how to build queries, and a query is just a way for you to ask questions of your data. The next stop will be to learn about forms, and forms simply dress up your data to make it look nice. And last, we'll create some reports, and a report is just a printout of your data. And by the end, you'll have a decent foundation of how Access works, and you can also download a copy of this database if you want to follow along as well. Before we start building our database, let's look at the big picture just to get familiar with the components or pieces of an Access database and define what they are. Access databases can contain the following: tables, queries, forms, reports, macros, and modules. Starting with tables. Tables, bar none, are the most important part in your database because they serve one primary purpose, and that's storing data. In short, tables are the heart and soul of your database, and it's crucial you understand them. And just to paint a picture in your mind of what a table looks like, imagine an Excel list. A list from Excel is roughly equivalent to a table in Access. The next component is a query. A query lets you ask questions of your data, and queries are really the workhorses of your database because they are incredibly powerful. In this tutorial, we'll take a look at a few high-level examples just to give you a taste, yet moving forward in your Access career, learning how to build a query will really help you out. The next component is a form, and the easiest way to understand a form is to imagine you're online, placing an order, filling out a screen where you have to provide your name, address, city, credit card, etc. If you get that image in your mind, that's a form. The next component is a report, and a report is just a printout of your data, which is often based on a table or a query. The next part is a macro. Here in Access, macros are a little different from other apps because they are ready-made, more building blockish in nature. And the last component is a module. Modules are where you can go in and do full-on coding if that's something you're into. Okay, so that's an overview of all the pieces in Access. Let's move on and create our database. Okay, to start, let's make sure we've opened Access. And from the home screen, let's go over here and click New. On this screen, we can download a lot of ready-made databases that Microsoft offers. But for our purposes, let's click on Blank Database. From this prompt, we can give our database a name and change the file location if we like. So let's go ahead and name our database. And for this example today, we'll keep with the classic training tradition, and the purpose of this database will be to keep track of our customers and orders. And after you name it, just click Create. So that brings us into the Access Design interface. And here is where you can create all of your components, such as your tables, queries, forms, reports, etc. Now, when it comes to designing your components, please be aware that everything in Access has two primary views, and a view is just a way to look at something. The two primary views are the design view and what I like to call look at it view. Put another way, there's a pattern you go through as you build things. You design it, then you look at it. You repeat the process as often as needed, and it's a good practice to not conflate the two. Now, that may sound a little awkward and fuzzy, but as we move along, it will become more clear. As we mentioned earlier, tables are the most important component of your database, so let's start there. And you'll notice that Access has already been kind enough to create one for us. That's very kind of you, Access, thank you. What you're looking at here is often defined as Datasheet View, and it will eventually show us all of our customers. So before we begin designing our table, when it comes to working with Access, there are a few terms you need to be familiar with, and they are fields and records. Fields are similar to the column labels from an Excel list, and records are the rows of data from an Excel list. So the way it works in Access, you first create your fields, then you add your data. The way we add our fields is by using the design view, and we can get to that by going up here, look for the protractor icon, click it, and then select Design View. Since this is a new table, Access wants to know what we want to call it. Let's go with the terribly original name of Customers. After we click OK, Access brings us into Design View, and here is where we can create our fields that we want to include in our table. Now, because this is a Customers table, it stands to reason that we want to keep track of the person's first name, last name, address, city, state, postal code, contact information, etc. So we need to create a field for each item. But before we do that, let's talk about this ID field, which most likely caught your eye. This ID field is known as the primary key, indicated by this key icon. And all the primary key does is gives every new record added to your table its own unique ID. To draw a comparison, you've encountered primary keys in real life, although you probably didn't realize it. For example, such things like Social Security number, national ID numbers, account numbers, invoice numbers are all examples of primary keys in databases because they uniquely identify some piece of data. The problem here is the word ID is too generic because we don't know what type of ID it represents. So let's change this into something more relevant like customer_ID and leave it as auto number. Moving on, let's go ahead and create our first field starting with first name because it's logical. So we'll jump down here and type first_name. And after we name the field, the next thing we have to do is tell Access how to store the data, meaning is it stored as text, numbers, date and time, etc. We'll look at some various data types later on, but for now, let's go with short text. Okay, so for our second field, let's go with last_name, and we'll make that short text. Our next field will be the address, so we'll type that out, and we'll store that as short text as well. The next field we want is the city, so we'll type that out, and we'll store that as text. The next one, let's go with state, and we'll make that short text as well. Okay, so let's add our zip code and have a quick discussion about these data types, specifically numbers and text. For those of you that live in the States, you might be tempted to store this data as a number, but that's not a good move. Here's why. In Access, the most common data types you'll work with will be text and numbers, and you can determine if the data will be stored as numbers by asking yourself one question: will I be doing any calculations on it? If the answer is yes, store it as a number. So by way of illustration, let's ask ourselves, do we ever add up our zip codes or phone numbers? Clearly the answer is no. So the data will be stored as text. Going one step further, if you use a data type of number, it can't have any leading zeros, and going one step beyond that, other countries use a combination of letters and numbers in their postal codes, so text it is. Okay, now let's discuss the other part you may be wondering about, which is why did I put an underscore in the field name and not use a space? Now, some people may view this as controversial because, yes, you are able to use spaces in field names, yet the rationale behind it is more grand in scope. You see, in other database applications like Oracle, SQL, MySQL, you can't put spaces in field names, so it's a good habit to condition yourself here in Access. We can fix it to make it look like regular text, of which we'll show you later on. For now, let's go ahead and add some customers to our table. So let's go up here, click the Save icon, then go over here and click View Datasheet, and here we can see our table. All right, so the next step is to add some records or some customers into our table. And the good news is it's similar to what you would do in Excel, and that's just good old-fashioned plug and chug. So let's add our first record by adding the first name, last name, address, city, state, and so on. You can move to the right by pressing the Tab key or the right arrow key. The choice is yours. And as we add our records, notice Access is assigning a customer ID automatically, and that's about as complicated as it gets. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and add a few customers just to give us something to work with. Moving on, let's talk about how to make these field names easier on everyone's eyes. First, let's save our table, then go into our table design. Make sure to click on the first name field, then direct your attention down here into this field properties area. In this section, we're able to refine and change things about the field. For instance, if we think 255 characters is too long, we can limit the field size to maybe only 50 characters. In our case, we'll focus right here where it reads caption. Think of the caption as a way for you to camouflage the appearance of a field name. By way of example, if we type out first space name, save our table, then go into Datasheet view, the field name that had the underscore in it has been covered up by the caption, so now the text looks normal. From here, we can go back into our table design, and we can apply some captions to our last name, our zip code, and we can save everything. Now, if we go into our Datasheet view, things look so much better. Okay, so the next step in our Access journey will be to create a new table, and this new table will store the orders from our customers. So to get our new table, let's go up here and click on Create, Table, go into our Design view, and at the prompt, give our table a name. Let's say Orders. By now, we know what the primary key is, so let's change the name to make it more practical. Say Order ID. And because this table is keeping track of our orders, some of the information we want to keep includes the product category, the subcategory, the price for each item, how much they wanted, when they ordered it, and most importantly, who ordered it. And there's something special we can do to make that work, of which we'll see in a moment. For right now, let's go ahead and add our fields. So the first field will be product underscore category. The data type, let's go with short text. And while we're here, let's jump down and apply a caption of product category just to make our lives easier. Next up is our sub underscore category. The data type will be short text as well. And jump down here and give it a caption of subcategory. We also want to know when they ordered the product. So we'll type out order underscore date, and the data type for this one, let's go with date and time. And we'll give it a caption. The next field is the quantity sold. So for this data type, we'll store it as a number because we'll most likely do a calculation on it. And you get a caption too. Our next field, let's go with unit underscore price. And for the data type, let's go with currency. And we'll put a caption as well. We like our captions. Now, let's talk about how to handle who placed the order, which brings us to an important concept here in the world of Access. Since your database is going to have multiple tables, in order to get your database to work properly, your tables have to talk to each other. Think of it as building a bridge between the two tables. The way that's done is to have a common field between the tables. In our case, we want to connect the orders table to the customers table so we can use the customer ID field as the connection between the two tables. So here we'll type out customer underscore ID since it relates or points back to the customers table, and we'll make the data type a number. Let's go ahead and save our work, and that'll wrap up tables for the time being. We'll come back and use them here in a bit, but for right now, let's go ahead and close any open tables and move on to our next topic, table relationships. Okay, after you've created your tables, the next step is to officially connect them so they can talk to each other. This is known as creating table relationships. To build the relationship, let's go up here and click on Database Tools, then click Relationships. That'll bring us to this screen, and over here on the right, we can see our tables. So to begin, let's drag our tables over here into this gray area. After we've added our tables, we can see all the fields, and this key icon shows us the primary key. If we study our tables, you can see we have a common thread or field between the two tables, and that's the customer ID. So this field will be the bridge or connection between our tables. To connect the tables together, click on the customer ID field from the customers table and drag it over to the customer ID field on the orders table. When you get this prompt, you're saying the customer ID field from the customer table is the same as the customer ID field on the orders table. Now, without getting too deep into things, where it says enforce referential integrity, it's a good idea to check that box because it acts as a safety net between the tables. In simple terms, it means you can't add a customer ID on the orders table unless it already exists on the customer table first. Basically, it keeps your data honest. So let's go up here and click Create, click on Close, save everything, and now these two tables are connected. Okay, so our next step is to go back to our orders table and add in some records. Let's go over here and open up the orders table. And let's say we got our first order from our first customer. All right, lucky us. And let's say they bought from this category, specifically this product, on this date. They wanted this many, and we'll type in the price of the product. Now, here is one of the big benefits of using Access. Because this customer already exists on our customers table, we don't need to repeat the customer details. Rather, just put in the appropriate customer ID. In this case, the first order will go to the first customer, so we'll enter the customer ID of 1, and Access knows the customer ID of 1 points over to the corresponding record on the customer table. So in this case, our first customer is Dave Murphy. Moving on, let's go ahead and add in some new orders. Suppose customer 1 comes back again and buys more stuff. So let's add our second order, fill in some details, and again, since customer 1 is the purchaser, we can type in the customer ID of 1, and Access knows it belongs to Dave Murphy. Let's keep going. Suppose things are going our way and we get another order, but this time it's from our second customer. So we'll add in some order details, and for the customer ID, we'll type in the number 2. In this case, the customer ID of 2 points over here to Andre Atkinson on the customers table. And by now, I'm sure you're catching on. So from here, I'll go through and add in a bunch of orders, assigning them to random customers just to simulate real life. And let's wind down this segment to talk about what's next with tables. From this point, in basic terms, it's really a matter of rinse and repeat, meaning you create some new tables, designate the primary key, add the fields to those tables, assign the data types, open the relationships window, then connect the tables together using a common field. Once that's complete, you just add your data. So that wraps up our discussion on tables. Let's move on and talk about queries. Okay, so the next big component of Access is queries. So what's a query? In simple terms, a query is just a question of your data. Yet over time, you'll learn that queries are incredibly powerful. And they are really the workhorse of your database because they allow you to do a variety of things like asking detailed questions, performing calculations, combining data, and lots of other stuff. In this video, we'll create a few queries just to give you an idea of how it works, starting off with a super easy one. So for our first query, let's say the boss wants to see a list of our customers, but only wants to see the person's first name, last name, and state of residence. So to build our first query, let's go up here and click where it says Create, Query Design, and that puts us into, you guessed it, the Query Design view. To start building our query, let's first go over here onto the right-hand side and drag over our customers table because we know that's our source. Now to give the boss what they want to see, we just need to add the fields that we want to use to this grid. And we can add those fields by either double-clicking on the ones we want, or we can click and drag to place them down here. The choice is yours. For starters, let's drag down the first name and put it here. Next, drag down the last name and put it here. And drag our state right down here. All right, so that does it for what the boss wants to see. The next step is to run the query. And we can do that by clicking on the Run button. And just like that, here we have a list of everything the boss wanted. Moving on, let's say the boss changes their mind. Imagine that. And now only wants to see the people who live in South Carolina. To solve this, let's go up and click on our protractor icon, and then from there, choose Query Design. When we're back in Design View, let's focus our attention down here on this grid. Here is where we can refine our query to show more specific detail. In this case, we want to see just the people who live in South Carolina, so click here under the state column and then type out the state abbreviation. And now, if we run our query, we'll see just the people who live in that specific state. Pretty cool. And let's save our query, give it a name, and move on and create a new one. Let's up the ante a little bit and say the boss wants to see a list of customers, what products they ordered, the date it was ordered, and how much they wanted. Let's start by clicking on Create, Query Design, and for this example, we need to use information that's stored across tables. So let's drag over our customer table, follow that with our order table. The line we see here is from the table relationships that we made in the previous segment and tells us we're able to pull information from both tables. So let's do just that by starting over here on our customers table and doing a double click on our first name, last name, state, and then over here on the orders table, let's double click on the subcategory since it shows the specific product. Next, we'll add the order date and the quantity. And keeping with the theme of access, we do have a few options. To run the query, we can click on the Run button, or we can choose to view the datasheet by going over here and clicking on View Datasheet. You can go with either one because they'll both get you to the same place. In this case, we'll go with the datasheet view. And there we go. Each row is an order that somebody placed, and we can see only the specific details that we wanted. Let's go up here, save our work. But why stop there? Let's keep going and look at one more type of query. And for this one, we'll learn how to do a calculation. So for this example, let's suppose the boss wants to see the sales amount for each order. And since we don't have that number, we have to calculate it. And to accomplish this, we need to use something called a calculated field. A calculated field is just a field you conjure, and it's most often backed up by a formula. Let's start by creating a new query, add in our tables, and in this case, we'll use the last name, state, subcategory, quantity, unit price, and then we'll click over here in this blank column. Okay, to create our calculated field, first, let's go up here and click on this builder icon, which opens up this window. And to build our formula, let's start by giving our field a name. In this case, let's go with sales. Next, we'll type a colon. Then over here on the left-hand side, let's expand things out so we can see our tables. Then click on the order table, which will show us all the fields here in the middle. In this case, our sales will be our quantity times our unit price. So let's double click on quantity, type an asterisk, then double click on unit price. Now, before we finish this formula, we want to go up here and click on this EXPR with the chevrons and press our delete key, because if we leave it there, Access will get very angry, and we don't want that. Now we can click OK, run our query, and check it out. We can now see the sales amount for each order that was placed. Okay, let's wind down this segment with a quick chat about queries. It's important to know that queries are really a stored set of instructions written in SQL. Put another way, when we were doing all those clicks and drags and typing, Access was writing SQL behind the scenes. So, if we want to see our handiwork, we can go up here and click on View, SQL, and right here is the query instructions. By chance you're familiar with SQL, feel free to have at it. On the contrary, if working with SQL is not your thing, that's cool. No need to venture in here because Access will do all the heavy lifting. All right, and that'll close out our look at queries. Let's move on and talk about forms. All right, so our next topic will be forms. So what exactly is a form? Basically, forms take our data and make it look pretty. Put another way, if we have to type our data into a table line by line, odds are it's gonna get a little rough on the eyes after a while. Forms just make things easy to look at. Access gives us several ways to create forms, and for our purposes today, we'll take a look at the form wizard. The form wizard is a step-by-step process for creating our forms. And the advantage of using the wizard is it gives us more control over the way the form is going to look by allowing us to determine what pieces we want to see and how we want the form to appear. So in our case, let's say we want to build a form that makes adding customers to our database easier. First, let's click on the customer table, then go up and click Create, Form Wizard, and from here, we just follow the steps. On this first step of the wizard, we can decide what fields to include on our form. We can show only specific fields or show them all. In our case, let's go with all of our fields and click on this double chevron icon. In this next step, we can decide the structure or arrangement of our form by choosing one of the options over here. In this case, let's go with columnar. And the last step of the wizard is to give our form a name. So we'll go with this name here, click Finish, and there we go. Here is our form. So on our form, we can now view individual customers by clicking on the arrows down here. Subsequently, we can add a new record by clicking on this icon. Why don't we go ahead and add a record or two just for fun. And then we'll go back to our customers table just to make sure the new people have been added. And there they are, pretty cool. We can go ahead and close our table and move on to discuss how we can format our forms. Back here on our form, let's go up and click where it says View, Design View. And here in this design view, we can make all kinds of aesthetic changes. For example, we can apply some ready-made themes, change some colors, change some fonts, or if that's too generic for you, we can go up here and click on the Format tab. This Format tab gives us the ability to get very detailed with our formatting. And by chance you're familiar with Microsoft Word, a lot of this will look familiar. We can start by holding down our Control key and then select a few of these objects. Then go up here and change our font type, our font color, or even apply some shading if we wish. Once we're done making our choices, we can go over here and click View, Form View to check out our handiwork. Let's go back into our form design. And another thing we can do is resize our form by letting our mouse rest on the edge here, get the double-headed arrow, then click and drag to resize. Likewise, we can resize these boxes by clicking and dragging on the edges. And we can even rearrange our form by doing a click and drag on the controls and move them to a new location. So let's save our work, and over here on the left we can see it. All right, and that'll do it for forms. Let's move on and talk about our final component, reports. Okay, and the final component we'll look at is how to create reports. You might recall that a report is just a printout of your data. And the good news is, since you know how to build forms, you already know the foundation for creating reports, since the process is practically the same. For this example, let's say the boss wants to see a printed list of our customers. To create a report, let's first select our table, then click Create, and choose Report Wizard. And just like when we created forms, we just need to walk through the steps. Since we're using our customer table as the source, let's just add the first name, last name, city, and state. And from there, we'll click Next. This next step of the wizard is asking if we want to apply any grouping to our report, which gives the report a nice, neat appearance. So in real life, it might make sense to group things, let's say by state, because it's logical and will make the report easier to read. In our case, we don't have a lot of data, so we'll just move on to the next step. Here, Access wants to know if we want to apply any sorting to our report. In our case, we'll sort our report by last name because we know the boss will like that. Let's click Next. This step allows us to choose the type of display we want our report to have. In this case, we'll go with tabular since it will look like a list. And over here, we can determine if we want the report to be shown in portrait or landscape. For now, we'll just keep the defaults. Let's click Next. Last, let's give our report a name. Go ahead and click Finish. And right here is our report. We can see our customers, the specific details we wanted to include. So if things look good, we can go up here and click Print. Yet, if our report doesn't look satisfactory, which will most likely be the case, we can go up here and click where it says Close Print Preview, and that will drop us directly into our report designer, which, as you'll notice, is quite similar to form design and behaves pretty much the same way. So we can click on a specific element, then go up and click on the Format tab, and we can change the font type, colors, etc. We can also resize these controls by doing a click and drag, which will buy us more room on the page if we need it. And in the end, we can design the report to look the way we want. Just be aware that report design isn't difficult, it's just very tedious, so you have to be patient with yourself. As we move along and design our report, we can always get a feel for how it's going to look by either choosing Report View or Print Preview, which are practically the same. The main difference is the Print Preview allows you to print directly, while Report View does just that. It lets you view the report. So you might find yourself jumping between different views to find the one that works best. And that will do it for reports. Let's go ahead and move on. The last topic we'll talk about in this video is how to get help, which, given everything Access can do, at some point you're going to need it. The cool thing is the help you get in Access is pretty useful and overall very user-friendly. The way it works is to first click in the area that you need help, then press your F1 key. For example, here we are in table design, and let's say we need some help with these data types. So we can click over here in the data type area, then press F1. Access will then take us out onto the web and give us a lot of useful details about these data types. And that's how you get help. Click where you need some assistance, press F1, and let Access lend you a hand. And there you have it. In a few short minutes, you've gone through the fundamentals of Access and have become proficient on how to use it. Let me know if you like this video, and if you folks want, I can start making some more in-depth tutorials on how to use Access. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.